Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
So, welcome back.
Nice to be back.
I think I was just telling Rocco Koza, the attorney, to come on. Quite frankly, I said, you and me might have to have your own engravement on the back of the chairs.
I would like that.
I think that might happen. Don't tempt me.
Okay.
You see how eclectic it is in here, right? I will make that happen.
Yeah.
So, okay, my friend, you were here during pandemic last time.
Yes.
Were you at the beginning of the pandemic? Did I have you in another room?
Yes.
Yeah, we did the 2-studio setup when the pandemic was fresh.
Yes, and I had to wear the headset.
Yes, no. So yeah, as you can see, headset, no headset. That's fine. Off camera, you made a comment to me as I was fiddling around in here. You said we talked about just a lot of things, and you used the term art disruptor.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so she's probably saying to herself, "How do I walk myself? How do I walk myself back out of it?"
Right.
Yeah, but I'm letting you off the hook on that.
Good.
So what is that?
So, well, I don't know. I think it means anything, like a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Okay.
For me, when I use that term, or the way that I think of it is, I believe the way that art is perceived right now in this country is that it is pretty elitist, and it really has, to me, there has been a disconnect between everybody and art, really. I mean, you go to museums and you kind of scratch your head sometimes, like, what am I looking at, and galleries the same way, like, it seems to me that we're getting further and further away from people just being able to enjoy, art. And so I guess that I like the idea of making art for everyone again. If that is what I mean by disruption, I guess that is.
Okay.
And to do that, you need to engage with your community with art. And there are many ways to do that. I have, my studio is pretty open. People can come visit me whenever. And I don't just take you through my studio, but I'll take you through other people's studios. And I think that's a really great way to engage with artists, to engage with your artistic community, and kind of fall in love with art again, instead of feeling as though somebody is telling you this is great art. Like, go ahead and say for yourself what you love and what is good art. I think that people are sort of afraid to do that. And also, it doesn't help that things like, an Art Basel last year, of course, it was canceled this year. You have a banana duct taped to a wall, and somebody's trying to tell you, right? That to me, that's what I mean by it's becoming elitist. Like,
okay.
What are you suggesting then with that piece of artwork?
Okay.
And are you, in that suggestion, alienating the majority of people that might otherwise, want to engage with art?
So what's the opposite of that argument? So when you ask that question, what will they say? What will they say? What's the argument? What would they say?
Well, I think that the argument will always be like, well, we know what's good art. It's just like,
sorry.
I don't know. It's this. I guess it's the argument: what's good art, what's worthy, what's bad art, and I don't know that there's an answer to that. I think that people should engage with artists and artwork in their own terms. Okay. And, I think that there's room for all kinds of different aesthetics, and it's very open, and it can be very open, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
Would that have happened, that piece of art have been that popular and that much of a news item, had it been 20 years ago before social media?
Yeah, I think so.
It would have been.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
it would have been written up about. It would have been a thing, and people would be scratching their heads, and other people would be like, that's hilarious. Maybe, is it a stunt? Is it to provoke? What is the purpose of art like that? I think there are lots of arguments and maybe not arguments, discussions that could be had about it. I just in the context of what I'm saying, I just feel as though things like that are alienating, because a lot of people don't want to engage in that conversation of why they should be looking at that, so they feel as though they're out of the conversation before the conversation started. So I just feel like we're getting further and further away from engaging our community, and we're getting to the point where it's just like, it's almost like a privileged thing to go to an art museum because you sort of like know what you're looking at or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly right. And I felt the way as a kid, because there was always in magazines that I would see at my grandparents' house or whatever, the well-to-do, you would see these incredible art things. A lot of them didn't make sense, but you get the feeling it was just not for me.
Yeah.
It wasn't for my parents or us.
Yeah. And, my art doesn't make sense per se, but it hopefully what I'm trying to do is just, use color and the emotion of painting and using that color to represent those emotions and those feelings and create a story that's fluid, that anybody can sort of derive their own story from. Like,
right.
I feel like that is what I like to do, and it's resonating with people. So it doesn't necessarily, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't necessarily need to make sense, if you will, but if it is making you feel as though you don't have a place in that arena, like that you shouldn't, you don't even want to start a conversation about how to interact with it, that to me is when it starts becoming alienating. Okay. And so like, I think that most of us have had the experience where we stand in front of a piece of artwork and we don't know why we like it, right? It's just beautiful, or it's challenging, or it's provocative, and it's doing something. It's moving us. Right. That's what art should do. Right. I guess that, at the bottom line, that's what art should do. And there are many emotions that, but as long as it's eliciting something in you, right?
The banana thing just kills me. 'Cause you're describing it perfectly. I just imagine me standing in front of that banana with the duct tape, and I could just, I would probably stare at it for 15 minutes.
Right, but it's, and I guess somebody might say to you, well, it's eliciting some reaction, right? Your reaction is that you are completely perplexed. Okay. Yeah, but I think I think that's kind of a cheap.
Yeah. There's a lot of things we could probably throw on the wall that would perplex people.
Right.
Rather easily. The entry point to do that doesn't really take much thought. Right. Or creativity.
I could come up with a million ideas right now that could shock and intimidate.
Right.
And it's just not, to me, that's not what art should be.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because that's so. As the person sitting there contemplating all of that, as the viewer is watching that, is the story behind the art and the experience that goes with that story, at that point, doesn't it overshadow the actual physical art? With the example we're using,
like,
everything behind the art becomes the actual.
That's frequently the case with a lot of museum art and art that's installation art or whatever. I think that I have trouble with this, because I even have trouble like writing artist statements, for example. Okay. I don't really want to talk about what my perception of my work is, or what I'm trying to do with my work. I would far prefer people to engage with it and have their own storyline and their own experience with it and let it sort of live and breathe that way, in so much as it has multiple incarnations of what it could be.
Okay.
Now, that a lot of work does sort of need an explanation in order to appreciate it. And I think that I appreciate the explanation when it makes sense with the work. But then there's a lot of artwork out there that has these, like, you know, they have these explanations that are just so
esoteric.
Yeah, they're just so, you know, to me they don't do anything. They don't describe the art. They don't help me understand it more. I get frustrated, and I just feel as though it's all about what they want to. The art is in the explanation and not in the art. And so
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's, you know, that can be.
There's a perception, I think, too, with most people, that if I see a piece of art and I read the explanation, or I try to understand what the artist is saying and I listen to them explain it to me, if I don't understand it, then it must be good and probably out of my price range. Isn't that
right?
It's a weird reaction, right?
Right. There's a great cartoon which I wish I had on hand to show you. I'll have to send it to you later. But
okay.
But yeah, basically, like, if it's so out there that you couldn't possibly understand it, it must be great art, right? And so you know, and there are people of that mind, certainly. It's just not something that I subscribe to. It's not my philosophy on what art is.
What's minimalism art?
Well, you know, I'm not exactly trained in all of the genres of art, in so much as how to academically describe what that is to you. You know, I didn't go to art school, as you know.
That's why I'm asking you.
I think that it's just, it's sort of, you know, just on the face of it, right, is something that has very little mark making. It's simple in its form, or can be. Maybe it has one focus. For example, you know, you could have minimalist art that's just a canvas, but perhaps it's, you know, shaped in a certain way. So you're focusing on the form of it. So I don't know, again, what the description would be, and maybe we could look that up. Thanks for throwing that one at me. I don't know.
I wasn't asking for a textbook description.
I do a few series, or maybe just a couple of series that I have that I would consider to be minimalist work. And in those pieces, I just use very raw
tan canvas.
I use linen and Belgian linen,
right? And
I just do different marks on this, and there's a story behind it, and there's a whole, you know, backstory which I can share, but I have found that I don't have to share. People seem to be connected to the work without that.
Right.
But yeah, so.
And the reason I brought that up is there's minimalistic music, or minimal, what do they call it? Minimalism.
Yes.
In music. I think of Philip Glass. He's a composer. He's done a lot of movie scores, but before the movie scores, he was very avant-garde in, like, I think New York in early 80s, late 70s. I remember being exposed to his stuff when I was, you know, a kid listening to rock and roll, and I sat through that with my parents. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And why would somebody sit? I mean, I understand a symphony. Right. There's all this music, all this noise and different instruments, but it was just a man on a keyboard. Right, with the sound, and then, like, is that
and
how
one
it
note,
was?
Right, one note
would
for
go,
a while, right.
And it would just, like, you know, and I tried. And I did the best I could at 20 years old to get it.
Right.
Couldn't get it.
Well, I think, again, you know, art is so wonderful in the sense that different things appeal to different people. And I think if I maybe were there and listening, I might have the same reaction, but I might have the reaction too of feeling very like going into sort of a meditative state.
Yeah.
And I think that is very appealing. You know, I think that a lot of minimalist work.
Sorry.
Wow. A lot of minimalist work is appealing in that way because it's very contemplative. It's very meditative, and I think that there's real beauty in that.
Well, I think a lot of his work gets a lot of credit for the music scores, and if you go and you look, and the most recent movies aren't coming to me, but people actually will take his score and then like duplicate it or triple it, so you can go download like 3 hours of him doing this same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Supposedly people meditate to it, they study to it, they work. So there's a place for it.
Yes.
It's not. I guess it's anything that's away from the norm. Always will get weird reactions from the public or
And
different
even
reactions.
what you might quote unquote call the norm might get. I mean, what is normal? Really?
Well, no,
I think that.
Yeah,
you know,
norm only. I was referring to you take 100 people off the street. Norm would be, for that norm would be what most people would say. What the majority of that group would view, how they would view something. That's all I meant by norm. But yeah, I get it. But that was.
I mean, country music is fairly normal, but there's a lot of people that would react adversely to that as
you
well.
don't say.
And metal and all these. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying, you know, like the beautiful thing about music is there's something for everyone there too, you know.
Art, right? Same thing.
Yeah.
So can't let this subject go. The banana. So is it easier? So
I'm sorry I brought it up. Honestly, I really don't have that big of an opinion on the banana.
No, put the banana aside for a second.
Okay.
No, it's not about the banana.
Okay.
It's just the issue. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference in the? Could you do a little of sculpture work too? Right. You occasionally create sculpture, right?
Yeah, very occasionally.
But you do it.
I have, yes.
So, is there a difference in how that is experienced beyond the 3D versus, well, you're not 2D because you have a lot of texture in your work, but you know what I mean, like the
2D,
experience to walk around and view it. Is there something inherently different in how that's presented to the public, or is it just art and you just merge into it?
I think all the different forms are unique in their own way, and I think there's sculpture that is wall hanging, so that's almost more similar to a 2D sort of thing. But yeah, I think one of the beautiful things about freestanding sculptures is the ability to navigate it and see the piece change as you navigate the work, and maybe experience something different with every sort of step and viewpoint. And that's interesting, right? I mean, that to me keeps work pretty fresh and allows the work to keep sort of having its story changed all the time by the viewpoint of the person experiencing it. I don't know. I think sculpture is very moving for me.
Okay.
I am intimidated personally to pursue that more because I'm not there yet, but I think I see my work eventually kind of going in that direction. I've thought a lot about how to translate some of my things into more sculptural presentations, but yeah, I think that, and then you could say installation art, you know, is another, can be sculptural in some ways, I suppose.
What that is.
So an installation art piece would be, you take over to some degree a space and you fill that or not fill it. I've seen very, very sparse installation work where there might just be one thing, but you experience the art in an environment. And I think that, again, you're asking me to like define things for you that, like, I don't know. I'm just giving you my definition. So please do not take this
installation, that's fascinating to me.
Anything more than my definition of things.
So we had Jeff on, our gallery owner friend here, and he talked about creating an experience. I guess that's what a gallerist does, right? They take art and they create an experience for the patron.
Yes.
Or the viewer. Mm-hmm. To begin with, and the patron. is installation part of that? When we use the word installation, is that different?
It's different. It's an art form. So let me try to see. Have you been to any of the internationals at the Carnegie?
Yeah, every week.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
They're like once every 4 years, and
No,
now
I'm not.
once every 5.
No,
but
I'm not.
no. So they often have installation art. In the last one, there was a large structure
Okay.
that was to resemble a home, I suppose. And yes, I don't suppose it was to resemble a house, and it was done with neon lights.
Okay.
And that was the whole center of the room, and there were other elements to it too, but that would be considered an installation.
Okay.
Right? And generally speaking, they're made for the space, so that's also very much part of it. It's specific to a space.
Okay.
And it utilizes the space as part of the art.
I think
So
I
that's
get it.
how I would
think I get
describe it. If
And
that
to experience it, you actually get immersed with it. You walk through it or walk around it.
can, yeah. I mean, there are certainly some installations that you can't walk through because there are, there's just, you can't walk through it because there are blockades or whatever
Right,
to some
right.
degree. But yeah, often you can navigate, you can go through the whole thing. And again, that would be sort of that same experience with sculptural work where you can see it from different perspectives and points of view. But you can do that with 2D art as well. I feel I think that is one of the things I like about viewing art is that, even on any given day when you go to view it, what you're bringing to that work is also your life experience and your just very simplistically your day.
Right,
and so
right.
you might receive that a different way every time you go.
And because your art is very, the first time I experienced your art, it was, you say it's 2D because it's on a canvas, but there's so much texture there that depending on how you're looking at it, it's completely different.
Yeah, I think that's probably stems from the fact that that's what I like, when I view art, is to see it change as I go around it or view it from a different angle. It's funny because right now I'm working in my studio on some pieces that have even more of that, and they are even there's a sense of there's an illusion to it too. It's really cool. Like I think I've talked about this before. Part of what I do in my studio is always going to include experiments,
Right.
and this is sort of what I'm doing right now.
Well, I've
is
seen the
experimental.
pile. I've seen the discard pile.
Yeah, yes, the pile.
And I was
It's
wondering,
about
and I'm looking at this stuff, I'm going, this is really amazing, and it's just tossed canvas, just tossed over here.
probably about 4 feet tall.
Yeah.
pile of
like,
discarded thoughts.
and that's what I think is so amazing about art and so fascinating. It's so specific to the individual creating it, because to someone like myself that would look at some of the pieces that you either have completely discarded or like you said, in potential transition.
Right. They're pretty much discarded. Yeah,
Well,
let's face
I mean,
it.
but me looking at it and seeing the reaction of some of the other people some of them were friends of yours, some of them you
Yep.
didn't know when I was there, just listening. People, and you would tell them that's just a discarded pile, and people were looking at that going, how is that discarded? Like, that is really awesome. But see, you don't view it that way. It's so
Yeah.
interesting how the artist views it differently.
Absolutely. I don't know if I'm sure I told you this before. This is our 4th round. But my brother,
Get used to it.
my brother is a glass blower.
Yeah.
And I would often get so frustrated with him because I would go to his shop, and when he would discard something, he would like put it in the water really fast so it would break. But you could tell some of these things were like really going to be awesome, and I was
That's
like,
how
what
I
are you
felt.
doing?
That's how some of your patrons feel when they come. That's how we feel.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think that's kind of, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess I don't think of it that way because I think, well, this is part of me, and if I don't feel as though it's really what I'd like to see, then I don't expect anybody else would like to see it. I don't know. I wouldn't show anything that I didn't feel really secure about.
I want to talk a little bit about celebrity artists and give you my impression of them. No, okay. Not textbooks. No, not okay. Textbook, and we're not going historical. None of that.
Okay.
The last 20 years or so, I would say probably kind of coincides with the web really getting higher speed connections and being able to view bigger files on screens and nicer screens. When that kind of started to happen, so I'm guessing like the early 2000s, it seemed to be a thing that a lot of celebrities from film and music and theater decided one day they woke up and decided, well, I've always liked to put to doodle on a napkin. I'm now an artist. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm bringing it up is I have, when I'm mentioning any names in the music business, there's been quite a few that have been on my radar. What I've noticed on some of them, though, is there's a level of hucksterism that starts to happen. And what I mean by that is because they have the celebrity footing to start with, there's already an audience. I don't know if it's captive, but it's an audience because it's already built into their merchandising mechanism. And that may create an initial illusion based on initial sales of success or financial success. They end up using the art strictly purely as a product.
Sure.
Knowing that I can go into my studio and I can crank out 10 pieces this weekend. Let's just say it's an abstract artist. That's what they do. 10 pieces. You know where I'm going with this, right? They crank out 10 pieces and they have they think they have a guaranteed audience. Now, there's a saturation point where it starts to slow down. But I think if a patron understands the background of an artist, when they look at those people entering the world of art and selling their wares, the backstory of that has to play into the decision to purchase the art, or am I off? Or doesn't it matter? I guess doesn't matter.
I guess that's the broader question, right? I mean, just like there are all different types of artists producing all different types of work, there are all different types of patrons purchasing that work, and so some patrons might just buy into the cult of personality type of thing and just say, okay, I don't even care if I like the work. I want so-and-so. Right. And you know, that's fine too. I say really honestly, everybody should do them, you know, and if that's what you like as a collector, then you know, how could you stop that anyway? You know, would you want to? I don't see a problem with it. I just think that people should surround themselves, if they're going to, with art that makes them, that moves them, that makes them feel something, that makes, and you know, for some people, maybe the idea that so-and-so painted this, so-and-so whose career I followed enough. Forever and whose music, you know, moves me, having a piece of them, if you will, in my home is an important addition. I personally, you know, am not moved by that, but I can understand it.
Really?
Yeah, sure. I mean, especially if it's somebody whose other existence, if you will, their other art form is something that has provided joy or you know, whatever, you know, emotion of any sort, right? I can understand that it's almost like, it sounds sort of weird, but it's like owning a part of that. It's like they know.
It's an extension.
Yeah, somewhat, right? But yeah, I mean, I can't really put down any like patrons of the art or people producing what they want to produce and because who's to say? And also, you know,
if there's a willing buyer, there's a willing, you know, creator, then regardless of the backstory, does it really matter?
I know what you're saying. Like if the work were produced and there weren't any backstory, and this wasn't produced by some famous person who had, previously done something of note, right? Would this patron purchase this work? Well, probably not, but maybe. So it depends on the work, I guess. But
I don't question that.
But I think that,
I question the fact that I think some of these artists are, boy, this is going to sound rough. They're
capitalizing on their success through this.
Yeah, I know. Well, they have the right to do. This isn't about someone's right. I just think they're treating this side project, because obviously it's a side project from where they get their fame,
right?
And they're putting things out as if they were designing a line of T-shirts to be sold at the concert,
right?
Now,
right, which is sort of like diminishing what I do, I guess, to some degree, if you put it that way. But I also just, I feel as though the person buying my work, a relative no-name kind of, like I'm not, a huge name, they're buying my work because it really resonates for them, and they want to live with that on their wall, and it does something for them.
Right.
And so I don't think that patron of mine is going to I don't think that they're going to be swayed by this other,
well, there's just so many different kinds of patrons too.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like they're just all kinds of different patrons, all kinds of artists. The world.
Well, it's the one thing you really can't classify as clearly as other aspects of life, whether it's business or other social happenings, sports. You can classify, and we love to do that, right? Label and look at statistics and all that. In art, it's really tough.
Yeah, it is, because there's no like centralized anything, and there's no like standard, I guess, and
should there be?
It's really the wild, wild west of careers.
Speaking of that, okay, so let's talk about. It seems like every time you come here, unfortunately, you're involved in litigation.
Yeah, but that's over.
That's wonderful to hear. It's finally you're here, and it's all that's been resolved.
Yes.
Thank goodness.
For now, yeah. Who knows?
The day's young, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's get into your recent Zoom session.
Sure.
I'm not a big fan of Zoom. I'm just not, but
right.
It serves its purpose.
Right.
You're involved in this. It was done in a kind of a class setting with your attorney?
No, so it's called Copyright, Copy Wrong.
Right.
And it was a informational. Oh my gosh!
I actually got one right.
I can't. I need some coffee.
Could have had that.
Yeah, it was put out by the Associated Artists of Pittsburgh to help to sort of guide our membership through the process of copywriting their work. And Barry, who's the Barry Friedman, who's the lawyer on the panel with me, and my copyright attorney, we did this program in person prior to COVID.
Right.
And so this was sort of a take two.
Okay.
And it was hopefully to reach more people, because you can just join and
right.
And also it's recorded, and so but cool. The purpose of it is really to educate other artists in because I think when this all happened to me, the copyright issues that happened to me over the last 2 years, I was just so blown away, and I didn't know where to start, and it's so intimidating, and I had really not known anything about copywriting my work. And so I've been fascinated with the process. I'm devouring the information. It's like super interesting to me. And since I feel as though I have some experience with it now, it was one of those important things that I felt like I wanted to help other artists navigate. And so we put together, and I should say I'm the board vice president of the Associated Artists of Pittsburgh. So I was part of the concept of putting that together for other artists. So, yeah, I thought it went very well. It's a fairly dry presentation because it really is about the legal aspects of it. What constitutes copyright infringement in art? And that's a really interesting question, right? Because it's easier to say what constitutes copyright infringement in music.
No question. No doubt about it. No doubt.
And there are, I believe the standard is 3 bars. If you can point to the 3 bars, then you've got infringement. It's a little more difficult when you're talking about art, unless it's like really obvious.
Yeah.
But you can still be infringing upon somebody's copyright even when it doesn't totally mimic entirely the original piece. Like if it's mimicking the style, for example, and the style was unique to this artist, then you are in fact committing copyright infringement. And for me, both of those times that I was experiencing this, it was more that than it was an exacting
It was
copy.
pretty obvious, though.
It was very obvious, and the reason it was very obvious is because I have certain styles with my different series, and it was clearly also one of the important elements of copyright. And I know I've just like exhausted this on probably the last 2 or maybe all of them. Is that access. And so copyright tends to be rather difficult to prove, certainly in this day and age, with so much access, right? That, in that way, the internet is both your best friend and your worst enemy.
Right.
Because anybody can go and see my work on the internet and copy it. And I really don't have anything, I can't do much about it. I mean, I could try. And I probably would, to be honest, but I can't. But I'd have to be able to prove access, right? And in the 2 cases that I decided to pursue, because there have been more people that have done other things, but these were the 2 that were so blatant. Yeah. And in both cases, they had access. So that's a really hard thing to prove. I was able to that was like proven off the bat. And so
seems so intimidating to a young artist to hear that, though, like the process, right?
Yeah, but I think educating people makes things less intimidating. That's the same with like viewing art. It's less intimidating if you know an artist, if you've experienced their studio, if you've just made any sort of connection with your art community. I think it becomes less intimidating. And with things like this, contracts and copyright and so forth, it's less intimidating the more experience you have with it. It was still, I'm not that young, and it was very intimidating for me when it first, reared its head. And now I'm not phased.
You talked a little bit about, was it for $75, a young artist, any artist can trademark their work, is that right? Not
trademark. So trademark is a different thing entirely.
Okay.
So copyright. is okay. Yeah. So there's trademark, there's copyright, there's patents. They're all
trademarks
different.
For advertising. It's a slogan or a
right. Like I trademarked the name The Mind Factory because it was my business.
Okay.
In the building that I was in. But so that's different, and that is a fairly expensive thing to do right off the bat, but it only lasts for 10 years.
I'm familiar.
Copyright is a $55 application.
Okay.
That said, if you go through an attorney, it's going to be more, but it's going to be way faster and less complicated. So it's not complicated in so much as the process of filling out the application isn't complicated, but it can get a little dicey if there are questions. And especially with art, sometimes there are. Like, what makes this piece copyrightable? Like, and there are stipulations. Like, you can't just simply like copyright, an image of a bridge that's been taken a bazillion times, right? There are stipulations to the originality of the work, in order for it to be copywritten. So I feel very proud of myself because I have copyrights on my work, which means that they concluded in their art department there that this was original enough to copyright.
Or unique enough.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, So that was part of the conversation as well. It's a good question and thing to focus on too, because what does it mean to be unique, and what are but I think what was the original question here?
No, let's talk about that. What does it mean to be unique? And it's such a broad. I know it's broad. No, but it's good to know.
Right.
Like, is there a list of directives that they look at to qualify that?
No, it's really, I guess it's rather subjective. And, there, as I said, there is a department within the copyright that does look at the work itself and determine whether or not it's something that they deem, different enough, I guess, than what's out there to allow it to be copywritten. I think that I know that my lawyer has worked with some artists who didn't get copyright because they have said, there's nothing about this work that stands out enough to copyright. So, I think most of the time it does go through, if unless you're out there copying other people.
Right.
I mean, really, we all have different voices, even if they're somewhat similar. My work is going to be different from other abstract artists, even those that come close. I mean, you have a different style, you have a different voice. You as long as it comes from somewhere inside of you, you're not replicating things.
When they look at your, like, for example, they take one of your paintings that you decided to get copywritten, and do they look at it strictly as a 2D representation, or do they take as part of your uniqueness the texture of the
No, they just look at it as a 2D.
Huh.
You
I'm glad
just
I
get
asked that
one
because I wasn't
image.
sure. Okay.
You get to send one image.
Okay. Get an attorney.
Well, the attorney, I wound up having an attorney now for this because his point is the best defense is good offense. Is that right?
Offense is good defense. I don't know. Yeah.
Whichever way around that word. No, just to be on the offensive, I guess, and say, I'm going to copyright this in advance. I'm going to talk about how this is unique. And to just sort of be able to have that in your arsenal if you're faced with somebody that might be ripping your work off, to be able, all right, here's the letter, rather than scrambling and try to.
Okay, so you're saying it becomes, by having that, hopefully it becomes an instant deterrent when you see something happen. That's the first level of approach is cease and it's almost like its own cease and desist.
Right. I mean, I guess for me in both these cases it was very personal.
Right.
And
well, it's theft.
And not because it was personal, because I wanted it to be personal, but I think both cases made it very personal. So.
But it's theft.
And it's theft, absolutely. And if somebody came into your home and stole, your money from your drawer, would you not pursue it? And especially if you knew who it was. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So think about if that's happening to you and you were cognizant and were able to pursue it, how many more times all across this country is it happening every day?
Well, and that's the other thing too. I think that what I'm trying to do, and this goes to what I've talked about in the past, is that I really try to be an advocate for artists, not necessarily an art advocate. And I feel as though my speaking up about it, and it did get press in Rhode Island. The second thing what happened in Rhode Island, and there were like 3 or 4 articles written in widely distributed forms of media, and it's like, if I can point it out, perhaps it won't happen to another artist down the line, or at least it will give somebody some pause about doing that. And it will also hopefully, and I think this is true because I've gotten a lot of nice letters from people and artists and patrons of the art since these articles came out, saying, thank you for doing that. Thank you for putting that in the mind of people, that this is a thing that happens. Like, that's all. I try to educate as much as I can. I try to be educated as much as I can. I mean, that's a never ending, life goal is to just keep educating myself when I can be, and passing that on so that it's just, I think it makes everybody feel less alone when we can.
Yeah, especially now
Right.
in light of the pandemic. Before we leave that subject, is part of the importance of what you're doing there also protecting certainly the value of the work, but protecting the investment that the patron made?
Yeah, always. Yeah, I always say that that's another thing. Like I would have been, in my opinion, if I had not pursued these particular cases, I would be not holding up my end of the bargain to my patron, right? And part of that bargain, if you will, is that I care about my work. It's unique to me, and what my style is something I've developed, and you're purchasing part of that. Right. So like if I allow, and that's a strong word, but if let's just use it, if I allow other people to copy it and put it out and diminish what I've done, then I'm diminishing the value and that relationship with the patron. So I think I feel as though it's a very important part of considering whether or not you want to pursue action.
Okay. You mentioned Newport, so there's some happenings in Newport. And I'd like you to reveal them here.
Well, I sort of wanted to turn things around a little bit for me there, because the second copyright issue was in Newport with a gallerist there, and it was I don't like being in these situations. It's not something that I enjoy. I really don't like trials and lawyers and any of that. But, again, I had to protect myself and others from this particular person. And but that was sort of like left a bad taste in my mouth somewhat from last year. And so this year I go every year to Rhode Island with my children. I'm from there. And I do have a studio there, but this time around, I was fortunate to have a much bigger studio, and I sort of just kind of, I don't want to say bullied my way into it, because I didn't do that, but like I sort of, I talked my way into it. I should say that, because that's
you need
more
to know
accurate.
her, and this will all make more sense.
But because of the particular situation we all find ourselves in with COVID, there's so many things that have come to a halt or need to be reimagined. I think what pivoted, I think, is a big word people use. I'm going to pivot this way. So I was getting geared up to go for my annual visit to Rhode Island, and I got an email from a gentleman that I grew up with. I actually played Little League with him.
All right.
And he sent me a message, and he said, listen, I am his name's Todd. I am the manager of this building that is a nonprofit. The idea behind it is that it's a tech incubator, and it's co-working space with some permanent, like, flagship businesses that are blue tech. That's a thing in Rhode Island. That's water based.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So marine biologist type things. And he said it's a beautiful facility. Basically what they did is they took an old schoolhouse that I'm familiar with. I didn't go to this school, but a lot of my friends went to the school. It's called the Sheffield School. And he said they took the Sheffield School and they just did this amazing, beautiful renovation with it. And now it's this nonprofit that's supposed to help, the broader community and be accessible to the broader community through membership. And they can go and take a desk for. So the idea is awesome because it works in a lot of places.
Okay.
We have so many, examples of it in Pittsburgh of shared workspace. And I think too, it's going to be a great idea once we get further away from or get out of where we are right now in terms of the risk. But right now, it's not such a great idea, right? I mean, people don't want to rent desks near anybody else.
Right.
It's like co-working spaces
Right.
must be quasi-vacant at this point. But so he said, he was talking to me, basically his question was, how much would it be to acquire a piece of my work for the walls there? And so we went back and forth, and I sort of didn't really think that much about it because I figured it's a nonprofit. They want this really big piece. It's probably going to be out of their budget. But he was thinking like maybe fundraise for it and whatever, so that we had an active conversation. And then I was approaching going to Newport, it was getting closer and closer, I thought to myself, wow, the wheel started spinning. So he runs a co-working space, and there's probably not a chance many people are in there right now. Mm-hmm. So he might have open space. Mm-hmm. And if he has open space, what I'd like to do is a self-guided residency there, because A, it would be a bigger space and I could work there, and B, it was going to be such a different summer for me in Newport anyway. Like, I wanted to focus on work and things that I could do there. Okay. So I contacted him and I said, do you have a space that I could use? And he said, actually, we do. Okay. And I said, great, I'm going to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some work from Pittsburgh I've already completed, but I'm going to do some work in the physical space as much as I can in a month, because, clearly as an oil painter, that's not a whole lot. But I brought a lot of other work from Pittsburgh, some of it quasi-finished, most of it finished. And I finished the ones that needed to be finished. And I did create some new pieces. And at the end of the month, I hung everything up as like an exhibition. Okay. And so I'm actually going to go back in November to pick everything up, but also we're going to plan some open houses in conjunction with this other thing that I started when I was there, which I'll get into now. Yes. So while I was there, I realized that, and this, I was correct, that this building was actually, like, there may have been 4 or 5 people in the entire building the entire time I was there. And even with all the COVID safety regulations, people just didn't feel comfortable coming into a co-working space. So, but while I was there, I really decided to delve into the art scene, which I've done, to some degree, but not to the degree I did this summer. And
the Newport art scene.
The Newport art scene. And I had like several curators come by. I had just patrons of the art come by, and I actually had spoke with a lot of different people in public office there, because this was a nonprofit building. There would be an occasional person from the city council or Chamber of Commerce, and I got in the ear of these people. And then what I figured out was that the need for artists in Newport was space. Okay. And I was being afforded the luxury of having this space for a month. And it was awesome. And even just having the space in this building that was fairly public was allowing me to expose my work to so many people. I probably brought like 50 people in over the course of the month, but in individual little groups. And they were just like so excited about the idea of merging and having art in a space like this with the tech, because the name of the nonprofit is Innovate Newport. Okay. And so I was stressing that artists are innovators as well. And so it became important to me to advocate for that, to advocate for space for artists, not just in this building, but then it became broader. And I recognized that it would be such an asset to Aquidneck Island, which is the island that Newport is on, to have spaces allocated at a reasonable amount per month for artists, and to really start to highlight that. And so that became my mission. And I was very fortunate enough to be introduced to a woman, Tracy Johnson, whose mission really paired with that. She started a nonprofit about 5 years ago, and one of her main goals, and she's fundraising for it now, is to establish affordable live workspaces for artists on Aquidneck Island. And I think that is a really amazing directive, I think that's a really big undertaking as well. And so we sort of had some talks about it, and I thought, well, obviously keep pushing that, but maybe in the interim we can work on getting just studio spaces. So, and I know we talked about this prior to going on Mike, but I know a lot of people consider, people are probably like, it's Newport. Why are you trying to fundraise or do anything for people in this shishi sort of, tourist town? And the reality is that as in any tourist location, there are people that live there year round. They are very normal. I am from one of those families, and their concerns are the same as everybody else that are going through this time period and everything. And it's been a really actually harder for a lot of residents there that are year-long residents because of the influx of people coming from cities who are avoiding COVID and finding these little towns and buying up the property and making it really inaccessible and unaffordable for people that have been there for, my family's been there for 47 years, for families like my brothers or whatever to actually even purchase a home there.
Right.
So never mind having art space, right? And so the arts community is sort of getting pushed further and further into the dark. And that always is sort of funny to me because it's funny how when organizations and people need artists, they have no problem coming to us. I must get solicited at least 30 times a year for donations to XYZ, right? And honestly, people just think you want to just give your work away for free all the time. And there are certain organizations that I've been working with for many, many years, the same, pretty consistent, same ones, and I give to those charities.
Right.
And I have to say no an awful lot. But yet when we come as artists to the broader community and say, hey, let's support our artists, there's it's almost a hard sell,
Why do you think that is?
Because I think that people like to have this fairy tale notion that artists don't actually deal with money. like you're just supposed to love what you're doing and there should be no financial attachment to that. And it's just silly. I mean, I think it's just...
It is silly.
Yeah, it's silly. But anyway, and now I'm saying that it's a harder sell. It is, but once you get your message out properly, it's quite an easy sell. Right. Because quite frankly, when you have a visible, viable, and vibrant art community, it helps the entire community. There's no doubt about it. Anywhere you go where you have artists settle into buildings, even if it's organically, if it's non-organic, either way, when you have buildings that start to be dedicated towards the arts and to makers, and by makers I mean like small batch manufacturing, maybe ceramicists, maybe like my brother who's a glass blower. Anytime you start putting together buildings like this with artists, it becomes like a destination for people. It's exciting. It's always active, and it's something that I think is, historically speaking, it never fails, And so, interestingly, again, going back to Newport, and only because I'm from there, so I know so much about it.
Sure.
That the economy is driven by tourism in the summer, right? And it's primarily service based. Right, all the restaurants,
absolutely.
all the boat
Jazz
tours,
festival, man.
Jazz festival and folk festival both canceled this year.
Yeah.
All of this, all these revenue streams, they're very much driven by, things like that, and but also but the restaurant and service industries,
right.
And I think this, this is such a widely used word right now that it's unprecedented times, but
it is.
I think for the first time, Newport was sort of like, oh crap, we don't have anything really that's standing out that's aside from, I mean, there's sailing obviously, but even with sailing, like there were things that you can't do, right? So what I try to stress is when you nourish and support your artist community, that's a year-long economy you're talking about. It's not specific to tourism. It's not specific to a season. And if you kind of, centralize that and create this energy, you will create a buzz, and people that will be constantly be flooded with people that want to view and be part of that. And so artists bring a lot to communities. I mean, not just that, obviously, in so many other ways. They're the creative forces when things slow down and you need to pivot. You go to creative minds and they sort of like show you the way. But yeah, so my goal, I guess, is to eventually see that happen. And so I spoke with the city manager and I spoke with other people that might have interest in seeing that down the route. And I've got such good feedback. And so I decided what I needed to do was show them that I could fundraise enough money to at least subsidize some space right now for artists. And so within 2 weeks, I raised about $5,000 to subsidize studio space. Right now, it's just for 2 artists. But the more money I bring in for it, the more artists we can serve. And the money goes directly to subsidizing the space. It goes through this nonprofit, Tracy, whom I was working with. It's called Newport Art House. And it goes through them and it goes directly to rent. And it was immediate that we got a space in Innovate Newport, and immediate that we got 2 artists in there through applications. So they applied, and they're already in the space. So it's really exciting to see that, because I'm always excited to get things moving quickly. And
Yes.
from the birth of the idea, if you will, mid-August to now we're like mid-October.
Right.
It's already happened, right?
Fast.
And so I think once we get the people engaged in that and viewing that and seeing how these 2 artists will activate this space, right? Getting that interaction with the broader community, I think will start to help people to demystify the whole thing of what artists can do to it, and start to maybe refocus some energy on getting that done for artists on Aquatic Island and getting that space for them. So, whether or not that is the case, I mean, I'm not going to stop trying.
Right. Right. But the thing about making the art accessible too, just from I think that by trying to make Newport more of an art community, or try to accentuate that art community, especially in tougher times.
It's supporting the artist community,
Yeah, but also especially now,
right,
in a time where a lot of the society is shut down, a lot of businesses shut down,
and artists are always like nobody. I think we talked about this in the last one, right? That we did a survey here with the Associated Artists, and 65% of our artist members said they experienced total loss or significant loss of income.
It's incredible.
65%. Yeah. And nobody really thinks about it, because we do tend to work in solitude, and we do tend to work with the ups and downs of the economy and so forth. And so it's not, but I think when you bring artists together and create awareness of their existence, even and certainly having a central location or having some more visibility helps the broader community understand the plight of that sector of their populace, and it's an important sector to remember, because it does really, the artist community is very significant to the health and well-being of the broader community, in my opinion, and in I think historically speaking.
When you look at Pittsburgh as a whole, how do you think we have fared as a city? Just take the last 20 years or so in terms of our community.
Well, I didn't really delve into the art community until like 2008. And that's when I sort of really became participatory.
Okay.
I think that back in 2008, I think also Pittsburgh in general was an aging community. Not that says that the art wasn't good. Certainly most of the best artists are ones that have, history behind them. But it meant that there wasn't really a great contemporary art scene. There weren't new ideas, if you will. Very good art, but maybe not new ideas. Maybe that's the way I should put it. And so there wasn't the vibrancy that exists today in the art scene. And I think you could probably say that about many of the sectors in Pittsburgh over the last 20 years. I mean, look at the culinary explosion that we've had here. No question. And I do believe that those sort of go hand in hand. For me, chefs are artists. They're just amazing. And I have so many friends that are fantastic, amazing chefs. And so I see a lot of crossover there. And, I'm not as familiar with the music scene, so I couldn't really speak to that. But certainly think about our tech industries and the boom we've seen in that over the past 20 years with, Uber and Google and all these things coming and having Facebook and coming and having these offices here. And that really brought in an influx of a younger population. And so the demographic in general over the last 20 years has really changed dramatically, right? Now it's no longer an aging population. I don't know what the median age is currently, but I know that it is it's dropped significantly.
Well, just the amount of creatives in the past 15, just to take 15 years.
Right.
Go back to 2005 to now. Just the amount of creatives in this town, and that word creative gets bounced around a lot in the social media era as well too. There's a little bit of a difference there. I think the lines get a little blurred. The traditional creative to me is someone in the arts. Yeah. But that gets bounced around now with video and content and all this stuff.
Sure, right.
Over my head. But yeah, we're not a cosmopolitan city by a long stretch, but we're heading in a trend toward cosmopolitan lifestyle, I think, as a city, as opposed to how we were pretty stodgy for a long time. Don't you think?
Yeah, I still think there's like this sort of grit about Pittsburgh that's appealing and real. I think that, I've lived in not that many places. I lived in DC for a while, and this is just a very different vibe here. Yes, it's a city, but it's also kind of like a small town. And I think that's why I transitioned pretty well from having grown up in Newport to being here. I believe the relationships that I've been able to make and foster are very genuine and similar to, not that I'm saying you can't have that in cities, but I just think it's clearly easy here. People are very open to helping one another. I think that might be a difference between like some of these bigger cities. Certainly in the art community, I feel as though there is just so much respect for one another's work and a genuine happiness to see others succeed. And it's really just, in that sense, I feel as though it's similar to having grown up in a small community. So
Pittsburgh still has that small town feel.
It really does. And it has a little bit of that grit. Like I don't know how to better describe it.
Well, I think it's in the DNA. Yeah. Go back to before you and I were born, and generations prior to us. This was and still to a little degree is still a steel town. Yeah. Regardless of sports teams, I mean that name, Steel Town, U.S. Steel, and all the foundries, and just I remember, as a kid, this was a mill town. That's what it was. And to some, I think that's in our DNA. I don't think that's going to ever change. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Well, as it will eventually change, to be honest with you, because eventually even the memory of that will have faded.
By generations,
right? But yeah, I mean, for now, that's where we are, and I think that history is very present in.
Is it present in the art when you look at the art as a whole?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of artists that kind of focus on that history. So, yeah, I think it's definitely present. I think honestly, in the fabric of everybody's artistic pursuit, there exists their history, personal and maybe that of their, parents and grandparents, and of the place that they lived. So I think whether or not that's very that's articulated visually in a very obvious way or not, it's there. Like I always say, I mean, for me, my art is still very tied to Newport, and it's tied to my experiences as a child, also in Grenada, and
colors there, right?
The color and for Newport, the sheer and he's obviously Grenada is an island as well. So like the ocean has influenced my work so dramatically. And while that might not be apparent when you look at it, for me it's there, and it's part of it's an important part of how I create. And why I create, I suppose.
Where are we going with this pandemic here? Do you feel things getting better? I mean, in terms of the art community, you don't see any kind of positivity at all?
Well, all right. I mean, if you're asking about other artists, like I don't know. I think that everything is uncertain. But as I mentioned before, those of us working in the art field and creative fields, probably in general, often and always deal with the ups and downs of economies, of situations, and so it's always a roller coaster ride. It's like entrepreneurship in general is a roller coaster ride. So I think that we're maybe more equipped at pivoting.
Probably good word.
Just to use the buzzword. And to just re-envision other ways to survive, really, right? Yeah. So I have no idea what tomorrow will bring. I try not to focus on it because it doesn't help me. And I really have always been somebody that's tried to focus on what can I do today, and I'm doing, commissions still. I'm selling work. I do find that there are a lot of people that have found themselves interacting more and more with their home than they ever thought they would in their whole life.
Yes.
And so as they do that, they are looking at walls, they're looking at, and you can see this in any numbers, like the home improvement stores and, decor and everything has gone through the roof. And so there are some people that are like, that's a big consideration. They're thinking about that. And I think that that's very helpful to the artistic community. I hope that, when they are thinking about that sort of thing, they engage in their local or any artists rather than, just putting up whatever. Like, right. I think it's really, especially if you're going to be in your home more and more, and I do believe that's going to happen. I think a lot of people are going to be working remotely that weren't previously.
Yeah, that may never come back.
I think to some degree it won't. And that's why I think when I mentioned Innovate Newport before being a great idea, I do believe as we, come out of this, places that offer, membership to have shared workspace are going to be invaluable, because then you don't have to have the brick and mortar of the office building, and you can have work from home, but also do things like this, even a podcast, right, from a shared workspace.
No question. Yeah, I think you're going to see that. I'm going to put you on the spot before I let you go here.
Okay.
I promise you, not too painful.
Okay.
I want to tell you personally thank you, but I also want to tell you that you really do well in this medium. Have you ever thought about the idea, on top of everything else you got going on, have you ever thought about doing your own podcast or your own type of, I don't know, whether it's a video or whether it's an art show or something in this new medium? Have you thought about that?
I have something that is, brewing.
Okay. I wasn't prying. I'm
No,
just
I know. We never talked about it. So yeah, no, I have ideas. You know, I don't think I would be a particularly great host in this sort of format because I'm great if you ask me a question. I can obviously speak for hours. Clearly, I've made that apparent. But yeah, I've thought about a lot of things. I try to again think about today. What can I do today, and what will keep pushing me forward, and how can I keep maintaining and creating and being the artist that I want to be. And I have to do that on my terms. And so that means then that requires a lot of thinking about what's next, right? Or the potential for what's next. And that's sort of, I guess, contradicting myself when I say I think about today. But but
it's a pandemic.
You know,
we give you a pass on that.
Okay.
The reason, the crux of the reason I bring that up is that I go back to that first experience I had walking through your gallery.
Yes.
And I mean, you know, it was something. I left different that day. Left a different person, and because I had never immersed myself in first off abstract art, but number two, in an environment that I wasn't rushed or forced to keep walking. I was there for the experience, and it was big scale. It was very, and I realized right away how that it's visual. It lends itself to like this medium. I know it sounds crazy because we're in a podcast medium, but we do a video show here.
Right.
So I do understand the power of that because
The
we
visual.
I didn't want to do an audio only. So that visual is so important, but that is taking things even further. And I see opportunity there to incorporate presentation and content
Right.
with all that work.
Right.
In a really kind of avant-garde, but kind of like constructively done way. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's infinite amount of ideas that and potential out there, and sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's about the climate being exactly what it needs to be for this to succeed or that to succeed. So there's always a lot of factors. And
everybody's home now,
and there's a lot of and you know, but here's what I've always believed. I would only be failing if I didn't try. And so
Amen.
I have seen so much failure in my life,
Right.
and I have hopefully learned from it all.
Right.
And so I just kind of in every facet of my life, personal and in my work and in everything, I just throw myself out there and I put all my cards on the table. And I've lost more hands than I've won, but I'm playing, and I think that as long as I keep doing that, then the success is mine. It doesn't have to be viewed that way by anyone else.
It's not a numbers game, though. You can, as long as you have a couple amazing hands, you can lose a whole bunch more and be okay.
Yeah, but, I mean, you can lose everything and be okay, right? What is success
indeed.
except for how you define it for yourself?
Yeah.
And I think for me, I define it as being as authentic and real. Yeah, same word. As authentic as possible, and just keep putting myself out there and not being worried about what other people might think about that.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
This was great, as usual.
Good.
Until the next time.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, Mia.
Thanks.
We're out, friends.